Friends in Recovery, the Addiction Recovery Podcast, is brought to you by Genesis House, FirstNet, built with AT&T, and the Friends in Recovery community, a thriving network of individuals who are fighting back against the stigma of addiction. Join our hosts,
Podfather, Jersey Ed,
and Noontime with Skylar Noon,
as they speak up about the real issues of addiction, treatment, and recovery. Friends in Recovery, the Addiction Recovery Podcast, is available on Facebook, Podbean, iTunes, and YouTube 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Now, here are your Friends in Recovery.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to Friends in Recovery Podcast.com. I am the Podfather, Mike Miles, and I'm here today with Noontime, Skylar Noon, and looking forward to this podcast. We don't have Ed with us today, Sky.
I know. He's not feeling well, huh?
No, I guess he's not. Under the weather.
Yeah.
I think he just took the day off, to be honest with you. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. You know,
Good,
I got family pictures scheduled for today, and I was just doing my makeup thinking, like, how grateful.
Oh, that's gonna be nice.
How grateful am I that I can take family pictures today? Like I just was having like a moment before podcast, and I was just
That's
thinking,
so
like,
awesome.
that sounds so. I never thought this junkie would have a family picture. Like that sounds silly, but it's so
No,
real. You know?
it's not. It's not. You know, it's funny. I was just going through my desk, and when I first got here, and I found a note my dad had sent me. I'd sent him a Father's Day card, 94.
Aw.
In 1994. Anyway, it was in my desk, and inside it was his mass card from when he passed away, my mother's. And I found a note my mother had written him, and then I found notes they used to leave each other. You know,
Aw.
oh man, I was bawling my eyes.
Yeah, it means no. It's just
Right,
a moment, right?
Family's
It's like that
everything.
nostalgia or
Yeah.
something. I don't know.
And it just goes by so fast, you know.
Yeah,
Like,
definitely.
Good luck with the pictures. Make sure you smile, because that smile is that's $1 million smile you got, kiddo.
Oh, well, I'll be sending them one to you.
Absolutely. Put it up here in the office.
Yes.
So we have a guest today, and I'm really excited to talk to Beth. And why don't you give a little background of Beth?
So Beth is on here today, and Beth is was a crisis unit nurse for 10 years, but in the healthcare field for actually 35. And then there's 17 years of those she's been in recovery.
Wow.
So she's got an awesome, like, just that alone.
Touching all the bases there. Wow.
That's just simple. That's just the simple term of it. 35 years in the healthcare, 17 years of that clean. Like, that's awesome. Right there.
You know,
That'd
years
be a good
ago,
story to go along with that.
years ago, I worked early nights, and I was in a cruiser that had 3 hospitals on my route. And in snowstorms, bad snowstorms, you know, we would pick up nurses driving to work. Back then, most of the nurses were women, but there were a couple of male nurses too, and I became friends with them as well. But I always admired the work they did, because, you know, they don't have any weapons to protect themselves, and all they have is their social skills. And I've seen some nurses talk people down that, as a cop, I would be nervous with a can of pepper spray and a gun, you know, and they just have this ability to make people calm down. And it just seemed like I've never met a nurse that wasn't able to use verbal judo, is what I like to call it. But anyway.
How are you today, Beth?
Hi,
I'm
Beth.
great. Thank you, Skylar and Mike. It's a pleasure and an honor to be here.
Yeah,
Oh,
we're so
welcome.
glad to have you.
Welcome.
So tell us a little bit about your nursing, like, you know, working on the crisis unit, and you know, a little bit about that.
Well, first of all, I got into nursing by mistake.
Oh.
I was on unemployment, and we had moved down the shore area, and there was a advertisement for free nurse aid training if you were on unemployment. So I figured, oh, that sounds okay. So I did that, and once I got into that field, I went back to school, got my RN,
Wow.
graduated in 1985 from nursing school, and never looked back.
Wow.
So I've worked in a variety of hospitals. I also worked not only in crisis, but I worked in an adolescent drug rehab.
Wow.
Assistant
Oh, wow.
director of nursing. And so I had to educate them. And I want to tell you, teaching sex ed to adolescents that are in recovery or trying to be in recovery is a very interesting thing.
Sure.
Those kids were great. They were from all over New Jersey. So I had rich kids, poor kids, urban, suburban, all different. So that was a really great experience. And then I also took care of I worked for New Jersey grant programs, took care of pregnant women that had addiction issues. Most of them were on methadone, and we would monitor their pregnancies. We had group sessions, and then we would take care of their children until they were 2 years old.
Wow.
So I learned a lot about heroin and methadone and what heroin addicts look like, which is not what most people think.
Right.
I used to do a little talk for school, and I used to tell them that in the line for methadone, there was everyone from what you think a heroin addict looked like to three-piece suit lawyers and doctors and mail people and cops and, you know,
Sure.
every kind of person. That it's not, no one's immune. No family is
That's
immune
for sure. That's for
to
sure.
addiction. I have a sister that's 29 years in recovery, my youngest sister. But the nursing part, so I worked in a crisis unit. So I was stuck in this little fishbowl with glass, you know, shatterproof glass in front of it. And usually the police or some recovery people, but it was usually, I worked evenings and nights. So it was usually the police bringing people in when they were either out of control or they drank too much or they used or they had revived them. The revived them usually went to the ER first, but we didn't have to have them cleared in the ER first. So they came right into my unit. And so I saw everything. I've seen everything from people MFing me and swearing at me to, God, I need help, you know? So I'm pretty unflappable. And I think to being a psych nurse that you have to be unflappable because you're going to see and hear everything. People are going to test your boundaries.
Mhm.
Now, personally, it's so funny because I'll talk later about, but I am in recovery, and in my home group, there are two of my patients. One of them is my sponsee, and the other one is a girl who says that came into the crisis unit. I was so nice to her, she couldn't understand why.
Oh.
I used to try to kill people with kindness that had an inkling of wanting to be sober and clean. If you didn't, you know, so be it. I could be mean nurse. But you kind of learned when you saw that slight sparkle of, I want help. So it was really, it was a great job. The experience, I worked there 10 years and I will never, ever give up the gratitude I have for the experience that I had in that unit. I worked with some great people. I worked with some tough people. But it was, all in all, I felt like I did my little tiny part to help the world, you know? And then I had psychiatric people too, that the worst were the psychiatric people that decided to use. They were the hardest to deal with because when you mix medication and substances, alcohol or any substances, it's a toxic mix.
Especially with mental illness, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Oh.
And we see that side together a lot. They go hand in hand a lot.
Well, now they call it dual diagnosis. They used to
Right.
call it MICA, you know?
Right,
Mm,
right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Now it's dual diagnosis. And I also have a little bit of opinion on bipolar. I feel that you can't, and I used to tell people this, that were using drugs. You can't figure out a real psychiatric diagnosis on someone that's high. My opinion. Because what came first, the cart or the horse? Are you medicating because of the pain that you're in? Or are you psychiatrically unable to deal with life and then medicate? So it's a fine balance. So I think a lot of people get, I think most of us, even when we're sober and not on medication, we can act bipolar. Everybody has ups and downs.
Yeah, definitely.
Part of life. So helping people out is what I love to do.
Well, I guess you would have to, I could listen to you go on and on because as you're speaking, I'm in hospitals in my head with different people, suicidal people, girls that overdosed, boys that overdosed. I had a particular young lady. She was prostituting herself to keep her drug addiction, going. And she was only 19, and she had graduated valedictorian from her high school from a surrounding town. And her mother and father had come to the station one night to bail her out early in her, addiction. And they told me that she was a valedictorian, and I mean, she was a lovely girl, beautiful, pretty girl, Italian girl, but just a wonderful girl. But she was out in the streets. So for a year and a half, I'd pick her up once or twice a month, and her name was Marlo. And anyway, make a long story short, I'd always ask her because I was in recovery at the time. I'd say, "Are you sick and tired of being sick and tired? When do you want help? When are we going to get help?"
Mm-hmm.
And finally she wanted help, and she got the help. And I know I've told the story before, but a couple of years later, I'm directing traffic at a supermarket. It's wicked busy. Cars are coming at me, and this beautiful girl in a Volvo and a baby seat's waving and smiling, and I'm like, she must think I'm someone else, So I wave, courtesy wave, and she pulls over and she's crying. She says, "You have no idea who I am." I said, I'm sorry, I don't, dear." She goes, "I'm Marlo." And I'll tell you, it stopped me in my tracks. Emotions, and she had gotten straight, and God bless, I hope she still is. But you just help that one person, especially when you're in that mix and you see it, the craziness, 8 hours a night, 350 nights a year, whatever, how many nights you work. It's just it's so nice to see it. And yeah, good stuff.
Yeah, it is. And you know what? It's great because that's that inkling she was talking about, like that inkling of hope she didn't give up on. It's like the
Right.
same thing you saw in
Right.
that girl, and that's why we don't give up for that
Never,
reason right
never.
there,
Right.
So
Right.
did you like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest a lot, that movie?
Oh,
Because that was one of my favorites.
I
Book
will
Great
two.
movie.
tell you something. That is not so far. from
No, it's not.
That's why I'm saying,
the
like
wall.
you said, I could be mean nurse, and I wanted to say Nurse Ratchet.
Yeah.
But it's true, and I could be. I was often I had reddish hair, and I was often called, "Oh, that redheaded beard."
Yeah.
But that was only the people who would abuse the system. That would make me crazy.
Yeah,
People
I
would,
know.
abuse the system because the system, it's stretched to the limits as it is.
Yeah.
Sure. I only wish society back in the 80s, when this epidemic was starting, I only wish society, the politicians, had taken as much interest in the people that were dying back then as they are now with this COVID, because there was an epidemic. There still is an epidemic of opioid and fentanyl, but it went, I think it's peaked, and I think it's on its way down now, hopefully. But I just remember that some of the nicest people you're ever going to meet. Just and what you said, Beth, is when you see somebody early in their addiction, you wouldn't know, but after a while, you could see the dead eyes, just the gaunt face,
Yes.
just that like walking death.
Yep.
And doing things they never would normally do.
Mhm.
And to me, when I was a young cop, there was prostitutes that actually made money, and they were healthy looking women. But these girls were out there risking their lives just to keep a habit going. And I mean, they were treated horribly. And I have 3 sisters and a wife and 2 daughters. And I mean, you just have that empathy, as most nurses do too,
Yeah, definitely. So you worked on so did you ever like have to stop someone from like suicide on the unit?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Like it's
When we
nothing.
first, when we,
Because that can't be easy. I mean, like, that's why I'm curious. Like, that's got to be.
well, hurting themselves, especially.
Yeah.
We had one guy that used to come in. He was a very big guy, very strong. He used to come in out of control. And one day when we had a locked room, we're not supposed to lock people in a room, but we had to lock him in the seclusion room. And he ended up banging on the door that he cut his hand up. And actually, one of the ER doctors and one of the sergeants from the police department actually were able to talk him into taking medication, and the doctor gave it himself. I mean, this guy was so dangerous. And I've seen people pull the TV off the wall and throw it. I mean,
Oh yeah.
and sometimes it's real.
Right.
And I used to have a young girl who used to come in and do crazy things. And she looked at me when she goes, "Oh, Beth, I don't want to hurt you."
Well, she knew how awesome you were.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
Yes.
But no, and I always say that because just mental health interests me, but it's very like I have it. So it's not judgment. I just try to understand it. And it's just interesting because it I don't know. There's just so much to it,
Somebody
right?
who's truly mentally ill, it's heart-wrenching.
That's what I mean. Like
Schizophrenic. I love schizophrenics, and it's heart-wrenching.
Yeah.
Because they just don't, and they come in asking for help sometimes. Like, I need my medication adjusted or something like that. I mean, they'll come in and help. But we had people try to hang themselves with a sheet, because we had some sheets on a cabinet door.
Sure.
So it's very severe.
Yeah.
I was a correctional officer before I was a police officer, and I saw a couple of jailhouse hangings. And also as a police officer, I had one of my first calls was a gentleman who hung himself on some pipes in a dirt floor cellar, and what he had done, he'd taken a real thick rope, and he just crossed his legs like Indian style and just kind of hunched down. He could have stood up and he would have been fine, but he didn't. And it just baffled me how and of course he was definitely a substance abuser, but I'm a young guy. I'm 24, 25, and I'm seeing this and wondering how bad could life be for this to happen. But later, excuse me, in my own addiction, I remember being suicidal and having the ideation, and then going beyond actually having the weapon and writing the notes and having this calm over me like I hadn't had in years, because I figured this is it, And so I really do understand. I'm still baffled why, but I understand why people go that way. But to actually follow through, it just baffles me. It just does, and I'm sure it baffles everybody.
Yeah. So let's take a quick break here.
Yeah, take a quick break. friendsrecoverypodcast.com. We'll be right back.
You're first. First to respond. First to put others' lives before your own. And in an emergency, you need a network that puts you first, that connects you to technology, to each other, and to other agencies. Built with and for first responders. FirstNet, the only congressionally authorized wireless network for first responders. Because putting you first is our job.
Since 1992, Genesis House has been helping real people heal from addiction on their private recovery campus in beautiful Palm Beach County, Florida. Their family-owned program is accredited by the Joint Commission and offers detox and dual diagnosis treatment in a comfortable and confidential setting. At Genesis House, they focus on treating the underlying causes of addiction. Their comprehensive approach includes psychiatric care, individual and small group therapy, trauma healing techniques, and holistic care including yoga, massage, and animal-assisted therapy. After treatment, their clients enjoy the lifelong support of a nationwide network of Genesis House alumni. Call Genesis House today at 1-800-737-0933 to speak with someone who understands. Visit them on the web at www.genesishouse.net. It's time to start your journey to a long and successful recovery.
Hey everybody, welcome back. friendsrecoverypodcast.com. I am the Podfather, and I'm here with Noontime with Skylar. Skylar Noon, how are you, dear?
I am well. I'm very well.
Yep, and we have a great guest today.
Yes, definitely. Beth.
Yeah, Beth. She's awesome.
So Beth, you were a nurse before you got into recovery. So what was kind of like the catalyst? Like, you're working in the healthcare field that you see a lot. So doing active addiction and then the catalyst,
Well, I was working, by the way, I'm Beth, alcoholic. And I was working in the crisis unit. And I'm basically a very honest, I'm the oldest of 8 children. So I was the responsible, one. And I had weight loss surgery in 1996. So I always said that I kind of switched addictions, food and then alcohol. And I find in the rooms of AA, there's a lot of people that have had weight loss surgery. So I found myself, it sneaking up on me. So I'm going to work every day. I'm working 3 to 11, perfect alcoholic shift. And I'm telling all these people at work, all my patients, to stop drinking. And I'm going home and getting drunk. Right. So that started really putting a hole in my heart and my soul. And I was living a lie. So I would be saying to myself, I'm not going to drink today. I'm not going to drink today. And then 11:30 would come around and I knew a place I could go to get takeout. So I would go there, and I was working with a social worker who was the number 1 person on my men's list. I was actually the number 1 person on my men's list. She was in the first top 5 though. And we're still friends. And I actually made amends to her because I was cranky and irritable. Well, anybody in recovery knows how the end is. And I had no consequences. I'm going to tell you, I didn't get a DUI. I didn't, lose everything. I was bad with money. I got myself in a little bit of debt, but I didn't really have anything bad. And it's funny, during the break we were talking about, and Mike wrote it. I had, there was 8 of us and there's 5 of us left. I lost a brother to a brain tumor when I was 13 and he was 4. So that was the first big loss in my life. And then my brother was a carpenter, and he redid my whole kitchen, and he ended up shortly after at age 47 hanging himself. So I know for myself what his demons were. I am sure that he had been sexually abused by a teacher. And I know he had sexually abused one of my sisters, and may she rest in peace. She's also gone. So anyway, when my brother Robert took his own life, it was a wake-up call for me, because it showed me where you can go when you're hopeless. And he was stone cold sober when he did this. I was hoping the talk screen came back drunk, but he wasn't. And he planned it, and he left messages, and he left the keys to his truck. And so he knew that this was coming. So I kind of understood, because he was very angry and his demons were, but it still was really enlightening to me. And he knew I was a psych nurse. So, I mean, he could have tried to help him, but that's not where he wanted to go. Right. And so that was in October of that year, and my drinking had really escalated. And January, and I remember at his memorial service, and then we went to my other brother's afterwards, and I drank too much. And my sister in recovery said to me, "Are you okay to drive home?" I said, "Oh, sure, I'm okay. I shouldn't have driven home." But I did, and I made it safely, thank you, God. But I knew that I had to do something. So I was seeing a therapist who was great. Loved him. And we were talking about it. And that January, I decided I was going to have a dry January. Well, it lasted till about January 15th. I started drinking. And then I was drinking until I passed out at night. And I could go to work because I didn't have to go to work till 3 o'clock the next morning. So 3 o'clock the next afternoon, I mean. So it was doable. I was going to work every day, never went to work drunk. I also put some dry goods in there, and only to keep myself up. I was hanging out with some people that did that. So we were drinking and doing that, staying up and playing Yahtzee all night and yada, yada, the whole partying scene. But I was miserable. I really was. I was hanging out with the wrong people. I was having relationships with the wrong people. I was just not being the Beth that I knew I was. So What happened was on May 19th, 2004, God did for me what I couldn't do for myself. And I was at a friend's house, drank a glass of wine, and all of a sudden had a horrible abdominal pain. I ended up having a bowel obstruction. So I talked the police into driving me to the hospital. I didn't want to take an ambulance, but I talked a cop into driving me to the hospital. He did, dropped me off at the ER because I was so convincing. And I ended up in the hospital for 5 days with tube down my nose, IVs. So I don't know if I actually had any withdrawal from alcohol. I mean, I was drinking 2 bottles of wine or a big bottle of wine a night, so I might have. But so I came home from the hospital, and my sister that's in recovery called me to see how I was, and she asked me about my drinking. And I said, I don't want to talk about that. And I ended the phone call, and I took my bottle of wine and I poured it down the sink. So May 19th of 2004 was my last drink. And thanks to God and to the program, I haven't had to drink since then. And since then, oh God, my life is so great. I mean, I have only luxury problems now. That's what I call it.
That's awesome.
I talk about all the time, even when I have a bad day, I act as if I'm a sober, happy, joyful woman. Some days that's hard to do because I don't feel so good, but I still try to act as if. And I was sharing at the noon meeting today that I always see the glass as full. It's half full with water.
I love it.
Full with it's always full. But my first is I got out of the hospital. So the first phone call I made on my way to Little Silver Saturday night meeting, because I didn't want to go near my house, even though there's a club right up the street from my house. I went to Little Silver Saturday. I called my therapist and I said, get the chair ready. We're going to have a lot to talk about. So now I see people in the rooms, thank God, that I've taken care of.
Right.
My sponsee, her dad brought her into crisis, and I let my anonymity go with her, knowing her dad. And, there's other people that I see. And life has just only gotten better. The energy that I used to use in my brain to figure out how to drink without anybody knowing.
Right.
Mhm.
Like taking the bottle, like I was the one that took the bottles to recycle and said, boy, that was a great party. The bottles in. Like the recycling guy cares.
Yeah.
But I think another enlightening thing was when I went to the liquor store, you go to different liquor stores. And when I went to the same liquor store 2 nights in a row, the girl behind the counter said, oh, you didn't get enough last night?
Yeah.
I was like, whoa.
Jeez.
So all I can say is sobriety has given me a life that I didn't have when I was drinking. I mean, I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful for others. I just want to add one thing because Mike was talking about it. I have a dream, and I've actually written when Christie was governor. I would like to open someday a work farm on the old Marlborough Psychiatric Center. And what it would be was big buildings where people that come into the ER that are drunk or high, either instead of going to jail, can be forced to do community service on a work farm. And what they would do is do farming or take care of stray dogs or something to give them purpose.
Right.
Because I feel if I didn't have purpose in my life, being a crisis nurse at that time, I may not have been able to be in recovery. So, I'm just so blessed that God got in between me and drinking and put me in the hospital that day. I mean,
That could have killed you. An
That's
obstruction. That could have killed you.
it actually could have killed me.
Yes.
So that is my, I just try to tell struggling people that they're really, I just wish someday I could like transfuse whatever that is in me that, like stem cells, give somebody that hope, because without that hope, we have nothing.
Well, you know what? You might have just done that. I'm listening to you, and I think it's a good time to give out our number, help at friendsinrecovery.com, 617-379-1163, because some people just look for a podcast, they'll type in podcast for recovery, and they might come upon this, which they have in the past, and it's been really good. But I worked early nights like yourself, perfect shift, 28 years, perfect shift for somebody that's using, because I felt good enough to go to work at 4:30, and at 12:30 I was like a racehorse. I couldn't wait to get out of there. They'd asked if I wanted to work overtime. I was like, no way, I'm out. And living alone, it was a very difficult. You had all this freedom. I was my own worst enemy. When I was by myself, I was in bad company. But
oh yeah,
it's just
it's like going to a bad neighborhood alone, Mike.
Yeah, exactly.
We can do that in recovery. We can't. We got to stop.
But I love what Beth said about having this life. They said in AA, a life second to none. And I used to hear that in early recovery. I had a lot of problems, And I tell the groups I run now, I tell them, sobriety is the easy part. It's the problems you got that you got to address, the legal problems, the marital problems, the physical problems, mental health problems, People forget this is a threefold disease: mental, physical, spiritual. And I'm talking about the people that are in the program. We forget that we're depressed, we're anxious, or we have anxiety or whatever, but it all goes hand in hand with recovery because our brains are healing and stuff. But
yeah,
definitely. So nice hearing Beth. So nice. Boy, you gave me goosebumps.
Yeah, that is great. It was great having you on here too. And I think that's great. Almost like a community really to open up in a way to open, because there's a TED talk on this I've watched before about how really that's what we need to do is give them a purpose, give them something, because they did it in a different country, maybe Portuguese or something. They don't have criminal problems with drugs because what they do is they try to reroute you in life, really, to a better path.
I think the old jail system in Massachusetts, anyway, Massachusetts is usually 10 years behind the West Coast, but I know as a kid out at Tewksbury State Hospital, they had a farm, and the people that were there for recovery worked on the farm, just like Beth's saying. It's such a simple concept, and it I'm not saying it would generate enough money to pay for itself, but it would certainly take the onus of extra money to pay for it, because you'd have people doing things for themselves. It's a great idea, and it's just going back to basics. And we got to have a purpose. If we don't work, we just lay around with an addiction, it makes the battle so much harder.
Yeah, definitely. And that's probably cheaper than running the jail cells.
Well, I always think of food for the food bank.
Yeah.
For all these rescues that have animals that have nobody to take care of them.
Oh, I love them.
Yeah, I know.
I watch those commercials and I can't call quick enough,
I know. It even plays the Sarah McLachlan in it.
Right.
That song. So.
Oh boy.
Well, Beth, I'm so happy you got to come on, and I'm so glad you're a part of my recovery journey, on a regular basis, and I love you to death.
Oh,
so
you, Skylar, I love you too. I love everybody in the group. And Mike, it was so nice to meet you.
A real pleasure meeting you. And Ed, I feel bad because Ed's not here today. Ed would definitely be chatting you up, talking you up.
He'd be part of my ego. I don't need any more ego.
He always finds the best guests for Friends in Recovery. He really does.
He does.
And this is just a good example of his work. Beth, real pleasure meeting you, and I hope we get to see you again and do this again.
Okay, excellent. Love to.
Super.
Thank you.
Thank you, Beth. Thanks, Beth. Well, Skylar,
that was awesome.
Right. Yeah, good show. Yeah, it is true though about Ed getting people that can speak from their heart, and anybody looking for help out there, sick and suffering, really. There's no need to be, it's not easy, but it's a lot easier getting help for your addiction, alcohol, drug addiction, than it is trying to keep it going, trying just to maintain.
Exactly.
You're not getting high anymore. You're not having fun anymore. You're just maintaining. You're just kind of hovering, and you can only hover so long. It's like treading water. You can tread water, keep your head up, but after a while, you get tired and it's over. So one more time, I want me to give out the number, Sky.
Sure.
Sure, it's 617-379-1163 or help at friendsandrecovery.com. Skylar Noon.
All right.
Great show.
Great show.
All right. Friends and Recovery Podcast. Thanks a lot, Beth.
See you soon at noon, Skylar.
All right.
Stay
The
sober,
new
everyone.
meeting for Skylar Noon.
Friends and Recovery Podcast.com. Stay sober, everyone.
This concludes this episode of Friends in Recovery, the Addiction Recovery Podcast. Thanks to Genesis House, FirstNet, built with AT&T, for supporting those on the path to recovery and keeping this valuable resource free for all our friends in recovery. Follow us on Facebook for past shows and updates, and enjoy free access to twice-daily support meetings. Brought to you by Genesis House and the Friends in Recovery. If you can't get enough of Mike, the Podfather, Jersey Ed, and Skylar, you can catch them on Answering the Call, the First Responders Podcast, available on Facebook, Podbean, iTunes, YouTube, iHeartRadio, and GenesisHouse.net.